The tomb was sealed with sandstone and silence, carved deep into the cliffs overlooking the sacred Nile. No one visited it now, not since the priests declared it cursed. They said the girl buried within had angered the gods, that her name had been stricken from the temple walls, and her soul denied entry into the field of reeds. Locals whispered that she had died screaming, clawing at the stone as the walls closed in. But even whispers feared to linger too long near the tomb of Neferet. Once the jewel of Thebes, Neferet had been loved by all who laid eyes on her. Too loved, perhaps, for her beauty stirred envy in a queen, an obsession in a priest. She had spurned their power, chosen a humble scribe named Kamudi instead, and for that, her fate was sealed. They accused her of sorcery, of seducing men with spells. The priest's voice had thundered in the court, and though her father wept and the scribe begged, the pharaoh's silence was final. She was buried alive with honey smeared on her skin, so her beauty would attract insects even in death. They cursed her tomb with words etched in obsidian. Let none touch her, or he too shall rot. For years, no one dared. Not until Kamudi returned. He had vanished from Thebes the day she was taken, swearing to the gods he would find a way to save her or follow her into death. Now he stood before the tomb, older, leaner, his eyes hollow with a decade of wandering. The desert had stolen everything but his love. In his hands, he held no tools, only papyrus scrolls, poems written for her. He pressed his hand to the stone. "Neferet," he whispered, "I am not afraid." That night, by the light of a crescent moon, he broke the seal. The tomb exhaled a breath of stale, cursed air. Inside, the silence was thick, the walls inked with warnings. He stepped in, past the broken urns and collapsed offering tables, past bones of mice and beetles that had long turned to dust. At the center lay her body, or what remained of it, wrapped in rotted linen, the honey now black and hardened like amber. Her face, though sunken, still bore traces of what once drew princes to madness. Kamudi fell to his knees beside her. "They called you cursed. I called you mine." His voice cracked. "I searched temples, crossed deserts, bled in foreign wars, but my place was always here, with you." He unrolled one scroll and began to read. Line by line, he poured out his soul, of the nights he dreamt of her voice, of the Nile refusing to sing without her laughter. Hours passed, or maybe days, until his throat was dry and his heart raw. Then he did what no man had dared. He leaned in and kissed her lips, cold, dry, but no fear touched him. "Let them curse me," he said. "I welcome their wrath." A breeze stirred behind him. The torches flickered. The air turned warm. Her fingers twitched. Just once, enough. The tomb walls did not collapse. The gods did not smite him. Instead, a distant sob echoed through the chamber, soft, feminine, as if the soul of Neferet had finally been heard. Kamudi wept. In that moment, the curse broke. Not by magic, but by love strong enough to defy the dead. And outside, beneath the rising sun, a single lotus bloomed from the tomb's cracked foundation. Kamudi didn't move. His lips still tingled with the chill of her mouth, and his heart pounded as if it could rattle the very stone walls around him. Her hand had moved. He had seen it, not imagined, not hoped, but truly seen. Yet her body remained still, wrapped in the decayed remnants of her shroud. Was it a trick of grief? Or had the gods, after all these years, finally opened one ear to his pleas? He sat back slowly, his knees aching from kneeling too long on hard stone. The tomb around him whispered now, not with curses, but with breath. The air had changed. The stench of death had lightened, replaced by the faintest trace of lotus and cinnamon, Neferet's scent. The fragrance wrapped around him like a memory, luring him deeper into something that felt both divine and dangerous. As he leaned closer again, studying her face, he noticed a crack in the obsidian jar beside her head. He picked it up, hands trembling, and turned it. Inside was a scroll wrapped in gold thread. No ordinary funerary text. This was not for the gods. It was for her. He unwrapped it slowly and read, "If ever love returns stronger than vengeance, then let the heart beat again. If ever a man kisses her with truth and not ambition, then let the breath of the Nile stir her soul." He looked up, eyes wide. This wasn't a curse. It was a test. She had not been damned. She had been hidden. Protected, perhaps, from the wicked who only lusted after her. But would the gods truly allow her return? Kamudi looked down and saw it. Her chest rising. Barely. Slowly. A breath. Then another. Her eyelids fluttered like a whisper caught in the wind. "Neferet," he gasped, crawling to her side, taking her hand carefully. It was cold, but not lifeless. He placed her fingers against his cheek. "I came back for you. I never stopped." Her lips parted, dry and cracked, and the sound she made was barely a moan. But it was there. A sound. A beginning. He wrapped his outer cloak around her, shielding her from the chill of the tomb, and carefully cradled her in his arms, her head lolled against his shoulder, and the strands of her once black hair, now faded with time, clung to his skin like vines yearning for sunlight. With every step out of the tomb, it was as if a weight lifted from the earth itself. The curses etched in stone dulled, lost their glow. The air outside welcomed them not with fury, but with warmth. The sun touched her skin, and she stirred again. Just a little. Her mouth moved. Cam, not his full name, but the sound of it cracked his soul open like pottery dropped from a great height. He fell to his knees just outside the tomb, holding her, rocking her gently. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the dust. "You're safe," he whispered. "No priest, no queen, no god will take you from me again." The cliffs around them stood silent, but something shifted in the world. A shadow broke across the sand and vanished like a snake retreating into the earth. Somewhere in the distance, vultures scattered as if dismissed by some unseen force. Kamudi knew this was only the beginning. To awaken her was one thing. To protect her from the wrath that would follow, of priests whose curses had failed, of nobles who feared the broken seal, was another. But he didn't care. She was alive. And that was enough to make him fight every cursed thing in the world. By the time Neferet could lift her own head, the sun had begun to rise in full. It bled over the Nile like a golden wound, warming her face as she sat cradled in Kamudi's arms beneath the cliffs. Her breath came slow, shallow, but steady now, like wind learning to stir again after a long silence. Her eyes fluttered open, not as the eyes of the cursed, but as the eyes of the living. They searched the world with a fragile wonder, like a child reborn into light after a lifetime in darkness. She blinked at the sky, at the birds darting overhead, at the reeds swaying by the river's edge, and then at him. "Is this the afterlife?" she whispered, her voice no louder than a reed brushing stone. Kamudi smiled, though his lips trembled. "No, beloved, not yet. You're home." She closed her eyes for a long moment, letting the warmth of his chest and the scent of dust and sweat ground her. When she opened them again, tears had gathered. "I dreamed I was drowning in honey," she said slowly. "The walls closed in. My screams couldn't escape. I thought I'd been forgotten." "You were not," he said. "I remembered. I searched." Her hand reached up, brushed the side of his jaw. "You aged." "Only on the outside." He chuckled through his tears. "Inside, I stayed the same man who watched you dance in the temple of Hathor, barefoot, laughing." "They said I was cursed," she murmured. "They lied," he said, voice hardening. "You were silenced for love, but that silence ends today." He wrapped her tighter and helped her stand. Her legs buckled, but he caught her. Together they moved toward the water. Kamudi dipped a cloth in the Nile and gently cleaned the dried remnants of honey from her hands. Then her face. She winced, but didn't pull away. "You're touching the cursed," she whispered. "No," he said. "I'm touching the sacred." Behind them, the tomb loomed. Once a place of fear, now an empty shell. But far across the river, smoke began to rise from Thebes. The priests had eyes everywhere. Someone would have seen the broken seal, the tracks in the sand, the figure carried from the cliffs. "They'll come," she said, reading his thoughts. "They'll never let this stand." "Then we don't stand," he replied. "We run." "To where?" "To the old ruins in the east, the ones the priests abandoned when the locusts came. No one guards them now." She gave a slow, tired nod. "Then lead me." He lifted her gently onto a donkey he had tethered near the edge of the trees. Her body was light, too light, as if the tomb had taken pieces of her. But her spirit was there. Her soul had not broken. They traveled through the reeds and into the wild palms, staying low, silent. With each hour, she spoke a little more, remembered a little more. "Do you remember the fig tree where we carved our names?" she asked as the sun climbed higher. "I do," he said. "Do you think it still stands?" "We'll find it," he promised. But behind them, unseen by either, a boat was already cutting through the Nile's waters, its sail black, its markings priestly, its passengers cloaked in red linen. The gods might have listened once, but men of power rarely forgive miracles. The journey eastward was slow and hidden. Kamudi led the donkey through narrow goat paths and forgotten groves where wild fig trees still bore fruit no hand had picked in years. Neferet, though frail, stayed upright, leaning into the warmth of the morning sun and breathing in the scent of dust, leaves, and freedom. Her color began to return, faint but sure, and her eyes, once dulled by death, now glowed with cautious fire. Kamudi stole glances at her between turns in the trail, disbelief flickering in his chest like a trapped flame. She was real, alive. And though the world would soon chase them, for now, they were beyond its reach. By midday, they reached a small rise where the land opened into a clearing shaded by a tall, knotted fig tree. Its bark was cracked, its roots exposed, but it stood, unyielding, eternal, like a witness to time itself. Neferet gasped. "It's still here." Kamudi tied the donkey near the stream and helped her down. They approached the tree together, its branches rustling gently in the breeze as if greeting old friends. She placed her hand on its trunk, her fingers finding grooves that memory hadn't forgotten. "Here," she said, brushing aside a curl of moss. "Do you see it?" Kamudi stepped closer. There it was, faint but still visible. N+K, carved with a copper blade in a time when they believed the world would never turn against them. "You were 17, he whispered. "You had fig juice on your lips, and you told me not even the gods could part us." "And they tried," she murmured, a bitter smile playing on her lips. "But we were too stubborn." She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. "Do you think I'm whole?" He hesitated. "You breathe, you speak, you remember. What does whole mean to a soul that survived death?" "I don't feel cursed," she said, "but I feel unfinished." "Then let's finish this together." They spent the rest of the day in the shade of the tree, eating dry bread and dates Kamudi had gathered along the way. She told him what she remembered of the tomb, strange dreams, the scent of incense, a woman's voice singing a lullaby she had never heard in life. He told her of his travels, how he had wandered to Nubia, to the far temples of the western oases, to forgotten shrines that spoke of love stronger than death. "Did you ever doubt?" she asked quietly. "Only once," he admitted. "When a priest in Akhmim told me no curse can be undone, not even by love. I punched him." Neferet laughed, and the sound was so sudden, so alive, it startled even the birds in the branches. But the moment passed quickly. As dusk settled and the sun dipped low, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. Kamudi stood instantly, hand on the dagger hidden in his belt. From the trees emerged an old man in black linen robes, bald, with a scent of myrrh clinging to him. A priest. "You've disturbed the balance," the priest said softly, his voice neither cruel nor kind. "You've awakened what was meant to sleep." "She was buried unjustly," Kamudi snapped. "You all knew it." The priest nodded. "Justice and law are not the same. And what you've done has called attention from places you do not see. We're not going back. You won't have to, the priest said. But others are coming, and they will not speak before they strike. He looked at Neferet then, directly, reverently. You should not exist, but perhaps in this moment, that is the very reason you must. Neferet looked at the priest, studying the lines on his face, the calm in his posture. He did not tremble at the sight of her, not like the others had in her trial years ago. He neither bowed nor raised his hand in warning. He simply stood, as if he had been waiting for this moment longer than even Kamudi had. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice low but steady. The priest's eyes met hers, and for the first time in over a decade, someone looked at her not with fear, but with sorrow. "Because I was there when they sealed the tomb," he replied. "I did not speak, I did not protest, and that silence became my curse." Kamudi stepped forward, dagger still clenched. "If you think I'll let you take her back, I have not come to return her," the priest interrupted gently. "I've come to warn you." He glanced toward the western sky, where smoke curled faintly in the air. "The temple of Wajet has sent riders, not priests, soldiers. They believe reviving the dead is treason against Ma'at. They will not ask if her death was unjust. They will not care." "Then why come at all?" Neferet asked. "Because the gods may not speak often," the priest said. "But when they do, their messages are clear. Last night, I dreamed of a lotus blooming from a sealed tomb, and when I woke, my skin burned with the words, 'She is risen.' Now who will protect her?" He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a scroll, sealed with blue wax. "This is a map to the Temple of the Horizon, an ancient shrine hidden near the red cliffs, forgotten even by many priests. It is a place of silence. No laws reach it. Only truth is spoken there." Kamudi took the scroll reluctantly. "Why help us now?" "Because I watched injustice happen," the priest replied. "And I am tired of watching." For a moment silence hung between them. A priest who did not kneel to Neferet. A lover who defied death. A woman who lived again. Then the priest turned. "Leave before the moon rises. The soldiers will ride under its light." He disappeared into the trees without another word. Neferet exhaled slowly. "Do you trust him?" "No," Kamudi said. "But I trust you. And you heard the gods too, didn't you? In the tomb." She nodded slowly. "A woman's voice sang to me." "I thought it was my mother." "Maybe it was," he said. "Maybe it was Ma'at herself." That night they packed quietly. The fig tree watched them, still and solemn, its branches unmoved by the breeze. Kamudi burned what little trail they had left behind, scattering leaves, muddying footprints, breaking off reeds. As Neferet mounted the donkey once more, she turned for one last look at the tree. "We carved our names to last forever," she said softly. "Maybe they did." "Let's make sure we live long enough to see if they're still there when we're old," he replied. And then they moved east, toward the cliffs that burned red in the moonlight, toward a forgotten temple whispered of only in the oldest songs. They had one scroll, one path, one another, and somewhere behind them, death was chasing what it had once claimed. The moon rose like a pale eye watching from the heavens, casting long shadows across the desert as Kamudi and Neferet pressed onward toward the cliffs. Each step of the donkey felt heavier now, as if the very sand resisted their passage. The air had turned colder, carrying the scent of incense and iron, an omen of what followed. Neferet clutched the scroll tightly, her fingers trembling. Her strength had grown with each hour in the sun, but something inside her still whispered of the tomb, of walls closing in, of air turning to stone. She had cheated death, but death was not done with her. Kamudi walked ahead, his eyes scanning the ridgelines and distant dunes. Every crunch of gravel underfoot made his muscles tighten. "They're close," he muttered. "I can feel it." Neferet looked up at the stars, at constellations that had watched her die and now watched her flee. "If we reach the temple, we will," he said, "or I'll fall carrying you there." The cliffs grew nearer, their blood-colored stone glowing faintly in the moonlight. Somewhere beyond them was the Temple of the Horizon, a place older than curses, older than kings. But between them and sanctuary, hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Kamudi stopped and pulled Neferet from the donkey, guiding her behind a jutting boulder near a bend in the trail. "Hide here. Don't move unless I call for you." She grabbed his hand. "Don't be foolish." "I'm not. I'm in love." He stepped back onto the trail as the first rider appeared. A flash of red linen, a bronze-tipped spear, then another rider, and another. 4 in total. They halted at the sight of him, raising torches high. The lead rider, taller than the rest, spoke first. "You broke the seal. You took what was forbidden." "I took what never belonged to death," Kamudi replied. "You've defied Ma'at," the rider hissed. "You'll answer to Pharaoh." Kamudi stepped closer, unarmed but unafraid. "Then summon Pharaoh. Let him speak to the girl he buried alive." The second rider dismounted and approached with a chain in hand. "Bring her out." Kamudi didn't move. "She walks only where she chooses now." The rider lunged. Kamudi ducked the swing and drove his fist into the man's gut, sending him staggering back, but the others closed in. A spear grazed his shoulder, slicing cloth and skin. He fell, blood soaking through his tunic. From behind the boulder, Neferet stood. Her voice rang out like silver. "Enough." The riders turned, stunned by the sight of her. Pale but radiant, fragile but defiant. "You call this Ma'at," she said, stepping into the moonlight. "A woman falsely condemned, buried alive, and hunted even in resurrection." The leader hesitated. "You are not meant to be." "And yet I am," she said. "Not by magic, not by treason, but by love. If that frightens you, then it is not I who defy the gods. It is you." Silence hung, thick and uncertain. Then the priest from the fig tree emerged from the shadows. "You've heard her speak. You've seen her stand. The gods do not burn her. The earth does not swallow her. Leave." The riders looked at each other unsure. The priest raised a scroll marked with Pharaoh's seal. "Return and tell them what you saw, that justice outran death." One by one, the riders backed away. They mounted their horses and vanished into the sand. Neferet dropped to her knees beside Kamudi. He winced, but smiled. "You didn't listen." "Neither did you," she said, pressing her hand to his wound. "I think we're both cursed with love." He laughed weakly, then passed out in her arms. And under the moonlight, they stayed hidden among the rocks, while the path to the temple waited just ahead. By dawn, the cliffs loomed tall and jagged before them, their red stone catching the early light like embers still smoldering from a divine forge. The air was thinner here, untouched by the salt of the Nile or the perfume of temple markets. It smelled of earth, dust, and forgotten time. Kamudi stirred weakly on the donkey, his wound bound with linen torn from Neferet's robe. Blood had dried along his shoulder, but the fever had not taken him. Not yet. Neferet walked beside him, holding the scroll from the priest in one hand and guiding the donkey with the other. Her strength had returned slowly, almost unnaturally, but her steps were steady now. The fear that once lived in her breath had been replaced by something sharper, will. She had seen death, had slept beside it, and now it would not command her. At the base of the cliffs they found it, a narrow crevice, shielded by an overhang of stone and creeping ivy that had no business growing in such dry land. It looked like a crack in the world. Neferet paused. "This is it." Kamudi opened his eyes just enough to nod. "The Temple of the Horizon," he rasped. "Go. I'll follow." "We go together," she whispered. She took his arm over her shoulder, guiding him through the passage. The air inside was cool and dry, laced with the scent of ancient incense. The walls, though worn by time, bore no warnings. No curses, only carvings, stars, birds in flight, open hands, and hearts pierced by lotus thorns. At the heart of the temple stood a circular chamber open to the sky. Sunlight poured in through a jagged hole above, illuminating a flat stone altar at its center. Neferet eased Kamudi down onto the steps surrounding it and stepped forward. The room pulsed with quiet power, like a heart beating beneath sand. In the silence, she heard it again, that same lullaby that had echoed in her tomb, now clearer, layered with voices. Women, mothers, daughters, as if the temple held the spirits of those wronged, watching her with calm approval. On the altar sat an object wrapped in faded cloth. She approached carefully and unfolded it. A mirror. Bronze, round and worn, its surface scratched but not shattered. She gazed into it, half afraid she'd see the cursed girl they once buried. But the reflection that stared back was alive. Pale, yes, but full of fire. Her eyes weren't hollow, they were stormy, and the voice that rose within her was her own. "I am not your silence," she whispered to those who had buried her. "I am not your shame." Behind her, Kamudi groaned. She rushed to his side. His skin was cold again. His lips cracked. "Water," he breathed. She looked around the chamber. In a corner, half hidden behind a carved lion statue, sat a stone basin filled with rainwater that had filtered through the ceiling's hole. She dipped a cloth in it and brought it to his mouth. He drank. Just enough. His eyes flickered open. "Are we safe?" "For now." "Then it was worth it." He smiled faintly, then closed his eyes again. She held his hand tightly. Around them, the temple felt less like stone and more like sanctuary. She could feel it wrapping around them, protecting them, not with walls, but with memory. This place had seen others like her. It remembered pain, and it guarded love. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "You gave me life. I'll give you mine if I must." Outside, the wind changed. Far down in the valley, the Nile glittered. But in the sky above the temple, a single hawk circled 3 times and vanished. A sign, perhaps, that the gods were still watching. And for now, they approved. Far from the cliffs and the forgotten temple, within the great stone halls of Thebes, the queen sat beneath a canopy of gold and blue. Her fingers traced the rim of a wine cup carved from onyx, but her eyes remained fixed on the empty seat across from her, the seat once promised to her son, now buried alongside his disgrace. The priest knelt before her, head bowed low. "The girl walks again," he said. "The tomb was breached. The curse was undone." The queen's grip tightened on the cup until a thin crack split down its side. "Neferet," she whispered. "Even in death she defies me." The priest dared not speak. He knew what silence cost. He had heard of the priest who warned the fugitives, and he knew that man's time was now measured in grains of sand. "And the boy?" the queen asked. "Kamudi," the priest said. "Alive, wounded, but alive. The same scribe who once delivered poems to my son's court, then seduced the girl meant to be queen." Her voice was sharp, venom hidden in silk. "I spared him once. A mistake." She stood and walked to the balcony where Thebes sprawled below, the Nile a silver ribbon beneath morning light. "How many more will see their love as strength, not submission? How many more will refuse my rule?" The priest waited. He had learned long ago that when she asked questions, answers were not welcome. "Send the Crimson Guard," she said at last. "Not priests, not riders, warriors born from my hand. Tell them not to capture her. Tell them to return with her heart." And the man, let him live long enough to watch her die. That is punishment enough. As the queen turned back to her throne, she paused, her gaze drawn to a tapestry, a depiction of Maat weighing hearts. The girl in the weaving bore a strange resemblance to Neferet. The queen's lips curled. "Erase that tapestry," she snapped. "Replace it with one of fire." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back in the temple, Neferet paced beneath the shaft of sunlight, her every step shadowed by a sense of urgency. Kamudi rested against the wall, pale but conscious. His fever had eased, and color had returned to his cheeks. "They'll come again," she said. "Not riders, worse." "Then we leave," he answered. "No," she said. "If we run, we remain hunted. But if we stand, He looked at her, really looked, at the set of her jaw, the fire behind her eyes. "You've changed. Death changed me. So did waking up alone, but you came back, and now I know what I'm willing to protect." She held up the bronze mirror, turning it so the light hit its surface. "This temple, this place, it reflects who we are, not who they named us to be." "Then what do you see?" he asked. "I see a woman the gods wouldn't take," she replied. "And I see a man who didn't let go." She walked to him and placed the mirror beside his hand. "We stay, we prepare. To fight, to be seen." That night she lit every ancient lamp in the temple with the oils drawn from forgotten alcoves. She dressed in linen robes left untouched for generations, once meant for priestesses of Hathor. Gold thread shimmered across her sleeves like rays of the rising sun. She stood beneath the sky shaft and began to sing, not mournfully, not softly, but with strength. A voice meant to echo, her voice. And in the distant dunes, the Crimson Guard paused beneath the stars, their torches flickering. One of them raised his head. "She sings," he muttered. "Let her," the captain said. "It will be the last time." By dawn, the Temple of the Horizon had transformed. Where once silence had ruled, now the air trembled with purpose. The old lamps burned steadily, casting long shadows against walls carved by hands long forgotten. Neferet moved through the chambers like a flame wrapped in flesh, lighting incense, speaking ancient invocations, awakening power that had slept for centuries. Kamudi watched her from the altar steps, strength returning slowly to his limbs. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he already knew. "Calling them," she said without turning. "The ones the queen fears, the ones she buried in scrolls and silence." "The gods?" "No," she said softly. "The women who came before me." She stopped at the base of a carved statue of a lioness, Sekhmet, goddess of war and healing. Her fingers brushed the stone paw. "They thought death would silence us, but stone remembers, and now, so will fire." Beneath her feet, the temple floor groaned, as if something below had stirred. Kamudi stood, grimacing through the pain. "They'll be here by dusk. I saw their shadows on the western ridge. Red cloaks, Crimson Guard." "Then let them come," Neferet said. "Let them see who they tried to bury." Together they carried the mirror to the altar. Beneath it, in the grooves of the stone, were shallow bowls that once held oil, now filled again. Neferet struck flint, and the flames leapt to life, forming a circle of light around them. She held the mirror high. "Let this reflect truth. Let it burn through the lies of the court. Let it show the queen what justice looks like." The fire pulsed. The mirror glowed. And in its bronze surface, Kamudi saw not just their reflections, but visions of women in chains, of mouths sewn shut, of tombs cracked open. Then came visions of flame, of screams echoing through marble halls, of a queen's crown melting beneath divine wrath. The temple trembled. Outside, the desert wind screamed. The Crimson Guard approached the cliffs with measured calm, unaware of what they were about to face. Their captain, a man carved from discipline and silence, signaled for them to halt. "This is it," he said, looking up at the temple's carved face. "We go in, we end it, no mercy." But even as he spoke, the earth rumbled. The very stone under their feet shifted, as if some beast had turned in its sleep. The captain narrowed his eyes. "Witchcraft!" Inside the temple, Neferet raised her arms as the flames danced higher. "We were called poison," she said. "But poison only kills when caged. When free, it becomes a cure." The mirror flared, blinding for a moment. Then it shattered with a sound like thunder, its pieces scattering in every direction. The flames didn't die, they surged. Walls that had once slept now bled with golden light. Sekhmet's statue cracked, and from the gap in her chest, red smoke poured into the air like breath returning to ancient lungs. Kamudi backed toward the entrance. "What did you awaken?" "Not what," Neferet said, her voice no longer afraid. "Who?" Outside, the Crimson Guard readied themselves. But as they took their first steps toward the narrow pass, the stone crumbled beneath them. Two fell screaming into the chasm that split open without warning. The others staggered back. Above them, from the temple's mouth, Neferet appeared, bathed in firelight, her robes dancing like flames, her eyes glowing with fury. "Go back," she called. "Tell the queen her curse failed. Tell her the dead sing now." The guards hesitated, but their captain drew his blade. "Kill her!" And with that, the final reckoning began. The Crimson Guard surged up the narrow path, blades drawn, red cloaks slicing through the dust like streaks of blood. But the moment they crossed the threshold of the temple, the wind shifted. The torches in their hands sputtered, then snuffed out one by one. The firelight within the temple intensified, not from the oil lamps alone, but from something ancient, something awake. Neferet stood in the center of the altar chamber, her arms raised, her voice lifted in song. It wasn't a hymn of mourning, nor a plea. It was defiance woven into melody, a call to all who had been silenced, a sound so haunting it seemed to echo from the bones of the temple itself. The first two soldiers who stepped inside faltered. One dropped his weapon. The other turned pale and staggered backward, clutching his ears as if the sound pierced more than hearing. It pierced memory. Kamudi moved through the shadows of the columns, blade drawn, his steps quiet but purposeful. He would not let them touch her. Not now. Not after all they had survived. The captain entered, unmoved, eyes fixed on Neferet. "Your tricks end here," he growled. "We don't kneel to ghosts." "No," she said calmly, turning to face him. "You kneel to lies, to crowns made from the bones of the innocent. But this is no longer your temple." She stepped back, and as she did, the statue of Sekhmet burst apart. From within, a burst of red-gold light filled the chamber, and out of the swirling smoke emerged a form, part lioness, part flame, taller than any mortal woman. Her eyes burned with judgment. Her voice was the roar of 1,000 storms. "I watched you bury her," Sekhmet thundered. "I watched your queen twist justice into chains. But Mayat does not sleep forever." The guards fell to their knees, their courage drained from them like water spilled on sun-baked stone. The captain alone stood, trembling. "She defied the law," he said. "Then the law was unjust," Sekhmet replied, and with a flick of her fiery paw, the captain's blade melted into ash. He cried out and fell to the ground, sobbing not from pain, but from truth crashing upon him like a flood. "Go," Neferet said softly. "Return to your queen. Tell her I rise not to curse, but to remind." One by one, the guards stumbled out of the temple, the fire parting for them but burning the backs of their heels as they fled. The captain crawled, eyes wide with horror, until he vanished into the lightless desert beyond. When the last of them had gone, Sekhmet looked down at Neferet. "You were not meant to return," the goddess said. "Yet you did." Neferet bowed her head. "Because the love refused to die." Sekhmet smiled, not with warmth, but with respect. "Then let the world remember your name. Let it be carved again, not as a curse, but as a flame that would not be buried." With that, the goddess vanished, leaving only embers behind. The temple walls, once worn and quiet, now glowed with new inscriptions, not of kings, not of gods, but of Neferet. Her face, her name, her story. Kamudi stepped forward, bloodied but alive, and took her hands. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she said, eyes shining. "We did." As the sun rose higher, light streamed through the roof and bathed them both in gold. Outside, the land was quiet. No soldiers, no curses, only wind and dust and the beginning of something new. They did not return to Thebes. They didn't need to, because the temple would stand long after they were gone, and every woman who came to that altar would see the carvings, hear the song in the walls, and know. She was buried beneath curses, but he kissed her anyway. And the world changed. In the years that followed the fire at the Temple of the Horizon, the tale of Neferet and Kamudi spread far beyond the dunes of Thebes, crossing the Nile on the lips of merchants, whispered among scribes in cloistered archives, echoed in the market songs of Memphis, and even scrawled into the corners of burial shrouds placed over bodies of unnamed women who had once dared to speak. Their story did not remain confined to myth, for even in the courts of those who had once served the queen, children recited verses of a girl buried beneath curses and the man who kissed her anyway. And that kiss, once a symbol of doomed defiance, became the spark that ignited centuries of questioning what justice meant when administered by the jealous, what law meant when wielded as a sword by those in power, and what love meant when it refused to die inside tombs made not only of stone but of silence. Neferet, once named as a witch and a danger to the divine order, became something greater than either sinner or saint. She became the voice of every woman who had been punished for speaking when she should have bowed, for loving when she was told to obey, for breathing when death had been assigned to her by decree, and in the far deserts where temples had long since turned to dust. Travelers still tell of a place where the walls bleed fire, not from oil but from memory, where the name Neferet glows in carvings untouched by sand, where the scent of lotus and myrrh clings to the wind like an unburied secret, and where a lioness-shaped shadow is said to guard the entrance not as a monster, but as a mother. Kamudi never left her side, not even when the new queen, daughter of the old one, raised in the aftermath of fear, offered pardons and gold to those who had survived the cleansing fire of the Crimson Guard, and when asked why he did not return to Thebes to reclaim his name, he answered only that his name was already written in fire beside hers, and that was enough. He spent his remaining days recording scrolls in the sacred ink of tamarisk and ochre, each one a story of those who dared to love in defiance of curses, and among those scrolls was one written not for kings or scholars, but for the children who would come after, a tale of a girl who sang through silence, a man who kissed through death, and a world that changed not because the gods spoke, but because humans finally did. And as the generations passed, and the sands shifted over bones and broken blades, the legend endured, not as mere entertainment, but as instruction, as reminder, as mirror. Because this story is not simply a myth wrapped in ancient Egyptian robes, not just a tragic romance carved into forgotten walls, but a parable for today's world where voices are still buried by modern curses. Curses of expectation, of patriarchy, of systemic silence, and where many still wait for a Kamudi to return, or to rise themselves like Neferet, breathless but unbroken. It is a tale that demands not only remembrance, but reckoning, reminding us that tombs are not always made of stone, that resurrection is not always divine, and that the line between the cursed and the sacred lies not in who speaks, but in who listens. Because even now, in a world of machines and screens and concrete cities far from the Nile's edge, girls are still being told their voices are too loud, their love too dangerous, their truth too inconvenient, and boys are still being taught that strength lies in silence rather than sacrifice. But this story tears those teachings apart like Sekhmet tore through the halls of Thebes, not with violence, but with clarity, with flame that purifies and mirrors that reflect. And if you, watching this now, have ever felt buried by judgment, crushed beneath lies, or silenced by fear, then let this tale remind you that what was once buried can rise, that what was once called a curse may in fact be a calling, and that one act of love, of truth, of defiance, can crack open even the most sealed tomb, because Neferet's resurrection was not just a miracle. It was a message written for every generation, that love is not weakness, voice is not treason, and survival is not silence. And so let the tombs teach the living. Let the fire pass from page to page, from screen to soul, and may every Neferet buried in this world rise again, not for revenge, not for spectacle, but for freedom. Let every Kamudi know that loyalty is not measured by strength, but by softness that endures, by faith that does not fade, and by a kiss that even in the face of curses and kings and death still dares to say, "I see you, I remember you, and I will bring you back."